I want you to hit me as hard as you can.
Hey everybody, it's Chris Bumbray here again for JOBLO.com with another edition of The Best Movie You Never Saw, and this week we're taking a look at the Disney classic, The Rocketeer. In it, Bill Campbell plays a young pilot named Cliff Secord who finds a futuristic rocket pack which he heroically uses in an air show, earning him the moniker, The Rocketeer. Unfortunately for Cliff, the rocket is also being sought after by Nazis, headed by a Hollywood swashbuckler named Neville Sinclair, played by James Bond himself, Timothy Dalton, who tries to get to Cliff by seducing his beautiful girlfriend Jenny, played by an impossibly young Jennifer Connelly. Now, in addition to Bill Campbell, Jennifer Connelly, and Timothy Dalton, this also co-stars Paul Sorvino and Alan Arkin with a full head of hair. And the music is by James Horner, and it's directed by Joe Johnston, who did such a good job with this movie, he ended up getting kind of the similarly themed Captain America, the First Avenger, which, like this, was a period World War II movie. Timothy Dalton was famous for playing James Bond in The Living Daylights and License to Kill at this time, and for many who grew up in the 80s, he was our James Bond. And it was his involvement that kind of made The Rocketeer a cool movie, and Timothy Dalton seemed to always relish playing the villain in this film, and in an interview with Random Roles, he even said, and I quote, "I enjoyed it hugely. I loved working with Joe Johnston, and it's not every day that you get to do a big Hollywood studio movie. I mean, most movies are made out of Hollywood away somewhere, and this was made in Hollywood. It was a great experience to do that and be part of it. I thought it was a terrific film." The name's Bond.
James Bond.
In the summer of 1990, Touchstone Pictures had a sizable hit with Warren Beatty's Dick Tracy, based on the classic 1930s comic by Chester Gould. And this, combined with the retro action of the Indiana Jones franchise and the big box office it earned, inspired Hollywood dealmakers to look at pulp material from the era in the hopes of crafting the next big franchise. Thus, we got some great movies like The Shadow and The Phantom, both of which tapered out pretty quickly at the box office. Disney was not immune to seeing dollar signs in their eyes, but rather than actually buy real 30s pulp, they instead bought the rights to a comic book character written by Dave Stevens, which was only set in the 30s and indeed seemed inspired by the adventures of a certain Nazi fighting archaeologist. In a risky move, studio head Jeffrey Katzenberg opted to make this a Walt Disney Pictures release, meaning anything risque from the comics had to be toned way down in favor of a family-friendly PG-rated movie. This was long before the era of Marvel, when Disney wouldn't think twice about making a PG-13. Back then, Disney meant families, and indeed, this switch is likely what doomed The Rocketeer at the box office, with the older kid and teen audience, who probably should have flocked to see this, skipping it, thinking it would be a kiddie movie. Despite great reviews, The Rocketeer topped out at $46 million domestically. Not a bad number, but far below what was needed to guarantee a franchise. Now, count me as one of those kids growing up in the 90s that decided to skip The Rocketeer in theaters, thinking it would be a kiddie film, even though I was like 9 years old at the time, so a kiddie film should have been just fine for me. I have to say, in the summer of 1991, there was only one period adventure movie that I was dying to see, and it was Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves. And my interest in The Rocketeer was so low that I actually didn't see it until a few years later, when my mother, of all people, thought it'd be worth checking out on VHS. Strangely, I wasn't interested in seeing it at the time, despite being a James Bond maniac, with Timothy Dalton arguably the biggest draw in the cast for me, with him playing the antagonist Neville Sinclair. And of course, when I saw it, I absolutely loved it. The Rocketeer is an old-fashioned Hollywood adventure, very much in the vein of Indiana Jones films, with Bill Campbell playing our square-jawed Gary Cooper-esque hero, Cliff Secord. Campbell should have been a star, but didn't quite work out for him. However, he would eventually go on to small-screen stardom in several popular TV shows. Certainly, one cannot say that Disney didn't swing for the fences, with the film using some pretty state-of-the-art CGI for the flying scenes, while the Art Deco Rocketeer costume is a thing of beauty. The supporting cast is also top shelf, including a bewigged Alan Arkin as Cliff's ornery sidekick slash mentor, while Paul Sorvino is the James Cagney-esque gangster bad guy, until a cool, heroic reversal towards the end of the movie. And they've also got Tony Ron Taylor as the hulking Rando Hatton-style henchman, plus one of James Horner's all-time best scores.
son of a bitch will fly.
All that said, the thing that makes The Rocketeer, for me anyway, a genuine classic, is an iconic turn by Timothy Dalton. Now, for those who don't know, his character in this, Neville Sinclair, is basically Errol Flynn. At the time the movie was made, a biography had come out that said that Errol Flynn was a Nazi, even suggesting that he may have been undercover for them in Hollywood. The rumor has since been debunked. Flynn was many things, but he was no Nazi. But sadly, his reputation has never really recovered, and to this day, it's become Hollywood folklore that he was a Nazi spy, and I have to say, a pretty damn irresponsible piece of reportage by Charles Hingham, with some even going so far as to say he altered documents to make his case. Nevertheless, it makes for a pretty good yarn, and Dalton plays it to the hilt. And Timothy Dalton seemed to have nothing but affection for Joe Johnston and the movies that he did. I think Joe Johnston was a terrific director, and I liked him very much. He went on to make one of my all-time favorite films, October Sky. It's a lovely, wonderful film. The name's Bond. James Bond. One of my favorite scenes in The Rocketeer is when Paul Sorvino's gangster baddie suddenly switches sides when he realizes that Neville Sinclair is a baddie, resulting in a sensational gunfight where the FBI and the gangsters wielding Tommy guns take on Nazi goons. Strange for a Disney movie to have this much gunplay, and I feel like it probably wouldn't happen nowadays, but I always love this scene, and it's a pretty riveting little shootout. And oddly enough, the second large-scale shootout in a Disney movie in successive years, with Dick Tracy also having a famously violent gunfight that I think turned off a lot of parents. Now, if you're looking for The Rocketeer, you really don't have to look far, people. It's available in a beautiful transfer right on Disney+. And I have to say, The Rocketeer is a great old-fashioned piece of escapism. It's a movie I've always been fond of revisiting, and it's a shame it was never able to spawn a franchise. Even still, it's one of those big swings, similar to John Carter, that maybe didn't pay off financially, but still look great in hindsight. So check it out. Until next time, for JOBLO.com, I'm Chris Bumbray.
Go get him, kid.